This is Ryan Abraham, Connor Morrissette, USCFootball.com. Instant analysis from an impromptu press conference.
Yes.
We weren't expecting when I woke up this morning. Jen Cohen, the 7-year athletic director for the University of Washington, has become USC's 10th athletic director of athletics of USC, and the first female athletic director in USC history. We heard about it sort of this morning, and then we kind of got word yesterday that something was coming down the pike. Didn't know who. Jen Cohen's name has come up a number of times, and then we found out today that it was going to be Jen Cohen. A few hours later, we had a press conference here over at USC where we were. I got to hear from Dr. Carol Folt and a bunch of dignitaries around USC and Jen Cohen herself, and we got to talk to her a little one-on-one or in a little group atmosphere after the press conference. But overall, Connor, a little shocking day today. And what were your thoughts on it?
Just my first thought is, how sometimes a president or a leader will say, this was our first choice, and then, okay, maybe don't believe him. I believe that Jen Cohen was USC's first choice, and so to lock her in and get her on board, the fact that she's starting tomorrow and they were able to keep this under wraps until today is significant. So I think USC went out and got the person who they thought was the best candidate for this job. We've seen overwhelming positive stories coming out already. I think John Canzano wrote it's a scary hire, how good she could be for USC. So just overall, I'm very excited about the future. For if you're a USC fan, I think you should be excited for the future, because it seems like when we had this conversation before, Ryan, in the past, USC, they've hired some people connected to the football program, and that didn't really work. Some people who maybe weren't qualified. Jen Cohen seems way qualified for this after spending so much time at Washington. I'm not going to predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen down the line. You can't predict the future. But right now, it seems like if she just is allowed to do what she does, it'll be a really good situation for USC and for her.
Yeah, a lot of professionals that you trust their opinion on really do like this hire. I talked to my counterpart up at the University of Washington for Dogman.com, Kim Reynolds. A lot of praise for her. So there was definitely a lot of accolades coming with Jen Cohen being the hire. And you mentioned keeping it under wraps, and it's one of those things. We were people asking questions about it before USC would leak a lot. This was before you were even covering the team. There weren't a lot of that on this one. Even I think the LA Times came out with a story yesterday, and there's pretty big miss on. It wasn't indicating that Jen Cohen was going to be the athletic director. So I give USC the board of trustees. I think they've pared that down a little bit. It's not as big as it used to be. I give them a lot of credit for kind of going through the right process and keeping things quiet throughout this, because there was a lot going on for Jen Cohen. Like, she just brought her university to a new conference, Washington. She said that happened in about 4 days, going from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. So there's a lot going on in her life, and she just sent her youngest son off to college, so her 2 sons are gone. She's now an empty nester. So a lot's been going on with her, but somehow they were able to keep this quiet and make it work. And she's actually starting at USC tomorrow, so she'll be here. Today's the first day of class. She'll be here before the first football game,
which is really encouraging. And I asked her about the challenge of bringing Washington to the Big Ten and also being up for this job, just how difficult of a process that was, 2 full-time jobs she was taking on. She just said, when I was working with Washington, bringing them to the Big Ten, that was my only focus. So a little bit of a question dodge from her. I guess I didn't know what I was expecting her to say. That was sort of a tough question, but I think that's a fair one, because when you're so involved, a key stakeholder in making a major decision at one school, and then a week goes by and you're working for a new school, I thought that was a really interesting development. The fact that USC is getting the full share from the Big Ten and Washington is getting half. If you're a Washington fan, that might make you scratch your head. Hey, why are you jumping ship going to a school that's making more money? But I guess just overall, the opportunity to come to USC was too good of an opportunity to pass up. That's what Jen Cohen mentioned, too. She said how the USC opportunity, there was maybe only 1 or 2 schools who she would have considered leaving Washington for, and USC was one of them. So it just seems like a really, really good match. Yeah,
her sons both play college football, and I guess they were most excited as anybody. They want to be on the sidelines. Who can we meet? It's just one of those opportunities. I think some of the first thing she said was she wanted to give her first fight on, which was interesting. But just the opportunity to come to one of the best universities in the world. She said she put a lot of hard work into where she was, and acknowledged the interim athletic director said she was one once. But this was one of those things where you have bucket list jobs, and this seemed like, hey, you're going to be an athletic director. You could be like Ohio State's athletic director, or Alabama's, or Texas's. USC is one of those.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too positive, but you got to be positive on a day like today, because there are winners and losers in college sports, Ryan, and we see USC, they go out, they get Lincoln Riley. the top choice to coach the football team. They go out and they get Jen Cohen, the top choice, I believe, to be the athletic director. And we feel bad for Oregon State and Washington State, schools that are losing during this whole realignment mess. But USC is one of the biggest winners by a long shot. And today, adding Jen Cohen to Heritage Hall to come in and lead the athletics program, I think that's just another check in USC's box right now for being one of those winners in this era of college sports, where there's only going to be about 10 or 15 schools that could really do what USC's doing right now in terms of bringing in a Lincoln Riley and a Jennifer Cohen. So I think that's certainly significant, and just another chance to USC for the school to flex its muscle a little bit. I really believe that. I think that contributes to just what they've done the past few months.
Yeah, we're in the Ronald Tudor Campus Center right behind us, and it was kind of an interesting setup. You had a bunch of TV cameras in back. There was a bunch of seats. Working media were in there, but among us were all of the coaches. I was sitting next to the women's rowing coach, Dane Blanton, the three-time national champion for a USC beach volleyball team, was in our row. Justin Silverman, the women's golf coach, like all the basically coaches. I saw Indy Enfield on my way in there, and it wasn't just about football, and I know most of the fans here are going to care about football, but one of the things they talked about was the opportunity to win a national championship in all 21 sports. I think she's someone, from the people I've talked to, is just going to get after. She cares about student athletes. She's a big passionate fan. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I mean, the fact that she wants to win in all sports, not just football. Yes, football's important, but she wants to kind of win across the board.
Yeah, really, really significant too. And we talk about how football pays the bills, and we're USCFootball.com. Football is, of course, the biggest thing on our plate too. But yeah, that's certainly significant, and I would expect any AD to say something similar. It's not just going to be a focus on one sport. But Washington, they've had some success in other sports, and I think that following just Jen Cohen's precedent, what she's been able to do in Washington, if she can take that to USC, that's really encouraging. We've seen USC have a lot of success in other sports as well. I think that's going to continue. She mentioned, like you said, winning in all 21 sports. That probably won't happen. That's a lofty goal, but it's encouraging if you're a fan to hear that. That's what you want to hear.
Yeah, so I think overall, if you're a USC fan, good hire. The athletic department in 2019, which she could have potentially been a candidate then. I almost asked her about that, but I probably wouldn't get into that. It's in a much better spot now than it was then. You're going to the Big Ten. A lot of that, the athletic department budget stuff is solved. I did ask her about sort of the travel, and she acknowledged she's just starting tomorrow. She's going to dive into some of these problems, but there are a lot of challenges. But overall, looking at USC's athletic department 2019 to now, it's completely different. You could get a Jen Cohen this time where you might not have been able to last time.
Absolutely. I had a source tell me when Mike Bowen resigned, he works in the athletic department, and he mentioned to me a list of about 20 to 30 candidates floated around the department, and Mike Bowen wasn't one of those 20 or 30 candidates. So that just goes to show how far down the list they had to go to hire an AD last time. And like I've said all along here on Instant Analysis, I believe Jen Cohen was USC's number one choice this time around. What a difference 3 years makes, huh, Ryan?
It's a very big difference. But I think for USC football fans, I got to talk to her. I asked her a little about NIL. It seems like there's not going to be something. I mean, she did say there was one of the buzzwords, and I think it was Carol Folt that said this, winning the right way, and that's something that Pat Hayden had said, and a lot of people didn't like. You can say things that leave a bad taste in people's mouths because of USC's memory, what's going on. But Lincoln Riley said some of those things. I would kind of trust what they're doing here. I think in that case, it's just about, hey, we're going to do things the right way. We're going to win. We're going to be, it'll be winning for our student athletes. It's going to be winning on the field. It seems like she's someone that really cares about, winning, obviously, and cares about the athlete's experience while at USC. And someone that really gets into her job, and someone that's going to dig down deep and do whatever she can to help teams win and help these student athletes.
Winning the right way, and you asked the NIL question, that instantly made me think of NIL, and I don't imagine USC in terms of a football NIL plan to really change. I think that's been from the top down, regardless of who the AD is, that's going to stay the same. I think that's been established from the top of this USC campus here, the administrators in the highest positions, and they don't want to pay high school recruits. I think we can just come out and say it. I don't want to be too controversial, but I think that's going to continue, and I wouldn't expect anything to change with this new hire at AD. I just think that's been established, and that's not going to change.
Yeah, it was funny. She mentioned during her press conference, Jen Cohen did, that watch out, because if I'm on the sideline, things get a little heated. And it was funny. I had mentioned Kim Reynolds, who publishes Dogman.com, and he's known her for years, and said, watch out for, ask her about Sideline Jen. And that was, I guess, a nickname he coined for her. And I asked her when we had our little scrum afterwards, and she put her hand on me. She was just so excited about it. It was funny to hear her kind of talk about the passion that she has for the athletics programs that she's supporting and stuff. And so she's like, I never got a penalty, which actually happened to USC, I think, with Pat Hayden and Steve Sarkisian back in the day. But it was kind of funny just this like moment of just her being an absolute fan. She's a fan of college football. She's a fan of college athletics and is not afraid to show it.
And I think that's significant. And I liken it to an owner of a professional sports team. You want your owner to care. You want your owner to be a fan. You want the person in charge not just to run a business, but to really care about the product and care about winning. And it's obvious that Jen Cohen cares about that. So that's immediately where my mind went to when you mentioned that, Ryan. And I think that's huge. You want someone, if you're a fan, to care as much as you do if they're on top. And that is what Jen Cohen's going to bring to USC. And I know in the past, as an AD, that hasn't always been the case for USC. There's some people who haven't really even been on campus for their tenure. So that is really important. I was really happy to hear her say that too.
Yeah, she's not going to be up in the ivory tower like going, oh, hope my peasants do well, kind of thing. I'm not going to mention any names of who was doing that, but that was what happened before. Any sort of final thoughts before we wrap this one up, Connor?
I think it's a great hire, like I said off the top. Do you remember Pete Thamel way back when Mike Bowen resigned? He said Jen Cohen is a name to watch. She's someone who could be really appealing to USC, and I think the fact that he brought up her name way back then just goes to show how big of a candidate she was, and that makes me also think that she was USC's number one candidate. She was someone who fits in really well. Pete Thamel, who does a great job at ESPN covering college sports, he put those dots together. He mentioned her name, and the fact that now USC's come through and added Jen Cohen, I think is really significant, and the fact that she was talked about way back when Mike Bowen resigned is really, really good, because love Mike Bowen, what he was able to do at USC, bringing in Lincoln Riley, that was great. But his name wasn't really talked about before he was hired. And the fact that USC was able to go out and poach a top candidate, very significant.
Yeah, big news here at USC. Talking to some of the people that work here, we're like, hey, this wasn't what I had to plan to do today. Like we're talking about, we weren't planning to come to USC to talk about hiring a new athletic director. Most of the people that work here at USC weren't planning the same thing either. So this was a surprise for a lot of people. The 10th USC athletic director in history here at the University of Southern California. She's originally from Southern California, from Arcadia, and now will come back and lead the Trojan athletic department going forward into what's going to be a crazy era with the Big Ten and all that. And she starts tomorrow at Heritage Hall, second day of class.
Doesn't even have a house yet, but starts tomorrow.
She had no idea where to live. I'm like, oh, you go to South Bay. That's where most people go. All right, well, for Connor Morrissette, I'm Ryan Abraham. Make sure you check out uscfootball.com for more.